Hey guys, it's Dark Siege. It's been a minute since I made a video. Holidays, sickness, all that good jazz, family. So here we are. I just went through a KVK and I wanted to update you on the best field march for Siege. We're coming up on, we just had 2 epic Siege Commanders released. We had another legendary released through MGE. That was John, and Steven's probably going to be released soon on the wheel. So, and we also have coming up, if you can take your gold heads and transfer them to somebody else. I mean, could be some rules or limitations to put them to Siege. There may not. But I wanted to update you on my thoughts and kind of what I learned through this last KVK. And it's somewhat interesting, so we'll go from there. Okay, who is the best pair? Currently, you have a couple different configurations, and I'll be honest, they're all really good. So if you had the standard release, and we have the S tier and the A tier, I only listed them there to show they're 2 different pairs. And I'm going to move them around just a little bit. But your first release was, you had Margaret. Oh, let's get that bad boy off there. You had Margaret and Bobber. And I have to tell you, it is still a really, really, really strong pair. Next release, you had Gonzo and Gajamada. Strong. So I played a few different combinations. And in addition to that, there's a lot of people in my kingdom that have Siege, and I saw some of their reports. And I can tell you, the top 3 or 4 Siege pairs are all just going to be phenomenal. And let's just go through it. Okay, Gonzo and Gajamada, right? You have the 2 right there in the S class. I have it. Absolutely strong pair. You're not going to go wrong if you went that direction. If you went Margaret and Bobber, I'm thinking 80-90% of the time you're fine. I don't see a problem with it. What I learned is I ran both of these pairs just like this, right? I had Gonzo as the primary, Gajamada as the second. Then I had Margaret as the primary and Bobber as the second. And mind you, Gonzo had my best pair of equipment, my best armaments, and I would say I had like 300,000 tier 5 and 50,000 tier 4. And then on Margaret, I would have 275 and then 75, T4, right? So with that being said, damn, I think they were equal at times, given everything. So I could tell you this. I came from a D seed, C seed kingdom, and when you fight people from a C and D kingdom, you have a couple rock stars, right? In every kingdom, right? For whatever reason, they go back. And they got anywhere from 5 million to 12 million kills. And they're legit players. And so in those kingdoms, you can find a lot of people that are not. So your trades are way, way higher. It was not uncommon for me to get like an 800 ratio, 900 ratio. A couple times I was in the 1100s. But when I had those really high ones, I was, popping out people that were having like, what's like the low cavalry I can't even think of right now. Like Saladin, right? Guys rocking Saladin, probably not that good a gear, and I am crushing that person, right? I think I made a video on one of those with my high stats, high ratio. So when you come to, I'm an A seed and you're playing really legit other kingdoms, the ratio changes dramatically, right? I was anywhere from 200 ratio to the high 600s on average. If I found a few scavengers that were around that were low, right, it would bump up pretty high. But that was pretty much average, right? I was anywhere from 200 to 600. And honestly, it depended on the length of the fight. When you have people cheeseburgering, it's almost like universal. It happens so often when there's like an imbalance in power, right? One side's higher, one's lower. You're walking through their kingdom, they're walking through yours, and they're just like sniping you out, right? It just happens. But with that, you have shorter fights. In those short fights, I would do the high 200s, 300s, maybe 400s, right? It just depended. On longer fights, those numbers went up. Okay, on short fights, Gonzo does really well because he's busting out AoE and he's hitting other people. That's the advantage. On long fights, Gonzo does fine too, right? Margaret and Bobber on long fights does just as well as Gonzo and Gajamata. Just as well. I have numbers where, I'll show you a few of my reports as far as the numbers because they've expired, but the percentage ratios that I have. And mind you, Gonzo has the better stuff, and sometimes the better, T5 and T4 people, the ratio between those, and Margaret would still pumped out a ton. So my point being is, if you wanted to save, gold heads and went through the dailies, or you already have a number of them invested because a long time ago you got some Margaret and Bobber heads, perfectly fine. I also found that there were times when there was a mismatch, right? Where, for whatever reason, we were on the losing side. And I have to tell you, Margaret and Gonzo was my go-to match, especially like in altar fights where you only had the option of using one field march. Being able to go into resource nodes and pop out to either get to the fight quicker or get away was invaluable. If I had to pick one pair and you were to get one pair only, I would say get Margaret and Gazamata. Only because of the durability and sustainability of the mobility. It is out of control how quick Margaret can bounce around and get away from the enemy quick. You set your tower up near either a friendly castle or a resource node, and someone comes after you. You bounce in that resource node or that castle. Right? Castle, you're safe, right? Somebody else's city. You bounce in that resource node and you run away. You're getting away for sure with Margaret. I noticed when I had Gonzo and Gajamata, I was getting clocked many times because it's just too slow when it's by itself, and you spend extra precautions when doing so. But I felt a lot more comfortable with Margaret and Gonzo. So if I had to recommend a top pair, I would say if you got one pair of Siege and one only, go Margaret and Gonzo. I think it's your best setup. If you had other ones, you're fine, right? So here's the other ones that are absolutely legitimate, no problems if you had these setups. Obviously, Gonzo and Gajamata is a good one. Margaret and Bobber. Margaret and Gonzo. Again, it's the one I recommended because of the speed. Bobber and Gonzo. Somebody in my kingdom was using this, and they were getting great trades, right? Nice. Now, we had an epic, and Catherine and Gonzo did really decent for me. I would say if you were short on gold heads and you had expertise Gonzo and then used Catherine as the primary, you would get at least a 200% ratio if you're fighting people that are really good. If you're in a D or C kingdom, I think you can get 600, high 600s, maybe even 700s on certain people. I have one report where I happened to put Catherine and Gonzo together, and for whatever reason, I was just sniping people that had low, kill points, and it wasn't planned. It just happened, and I got a 600. I was like, what the hell? So I went back and checked it out, and yeah, it was against someone that was weaker, but that can happen in a D or C kingdom. You could definitely, in a D or C kingdom, use Catherine as your primary and Gonzo. Margaret, that's Margaret and Bobber, and then you have Gonzo with Gajamata. And they're one is not necessarily doing a lot better than the other at times. Sometimes they're about even, or one's a little better than the other. See, I did the epic there. That was just the epics by themselves. And then I'll just start scrolling through some of these, The average was 4 to 300. I'm in the Britain KVK, so there's a lot of stratagems. And I think that hurts for Siege if you're not like a big spender. So I think that could contribute to some of my low numbers. If you want to call the 600 ratios low number. But those weren't always there. A lot of times it was around the 400 world. Again, a 518 was with Gonzo as the secondary. Right? This 1146, I'm sure I pegged somebody that wasn't all that good. Again, the 998, same deal. But it just kind of gives you an understanding of what I was saying. Like, these are some of the better ones. I typically had anywhere from 2 to 400 depending on the length of the fight. Like I said, shorter fights where people just popped out and cheeseburgered. You didn't get to pop off your skill. You're just doing white damage, anywhere from 2 to 300. This is Dark Siege, man. Range rocks, and I'll talk to you later. Have a good Christmas.